Welcome to season 2 of the Happy Sensory Corner podcast. At Mendability, we want to help everyone, especially when they are vulnerable, to feel happier, more comfortable in their own skin, more confident so that they can be their true selves. And we can all journey together through life more happily. And to do that, we activate the brain's self healing mechanisms with short, hands on games based on the neuroscience field of environmental enrichment. As our brains grow stronger and healthier, all of us benefit. And so we're experts in boosting brain development, but we're not experts in everything. For example, we're not experts in what you eat, physical activity, advocacy, education, job training, and something really cool. I'm really excited today to introduce you to Helen Sernett. Helen is the founder of and host of the Sleep Lists podcast, where she helps listeners drift off by reciting calming lists. Do you like my radio voice, Helen?
I love your radio voice. You're getting into the calming spirit too.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, Helen, if I remember well, you had severe sleep struggles, health challenges. Tell us how is this part of your journey towards I imagine there's a connection with your podcast?
Yeah, for sure. So I was completely burned out at work. I was also perimenopausal, which contributed to burnout and depression and anxiety and issues with my joints and issues with my hypertension. Everything was kind of all intermingled together. But what I figured out pretty quick was that on top of everything was a problem with sleep. So I had pretty significant insomnia where multiple times a week I just wouldn't sleep. Like I'd go through the whole night and not sleep. And then other times during the week, I would take a really long time to get to sleep. And I felt like I could never calm my brain down enough to actually get back to sleep. I have not had insomnia all my life, so I remembered that I could sleep previously, and I really wanted to get back to being able to do that again, because it was making me crazy and not a very nice person, also exacerbating a number of health and mental health issues. And so I really started to focus on trying to get better sleep. And metaphorically, I kind of looked at my toolbox and was like, huh, nothing here that I've got to help me fall asleep works. So I'm going to have to go find some new tools. And I tried lots of tools and none of them worked super great for me until I was like, I really want someone to just count. Like, I've got to be able to find a recording of someone just methodically, calmly counting from 1 to like 500. So I don't have to do it inside my own head. I used to be able to, and I've since been able to return to counting myself to sleep, kind of like counting sheep or whatever. But at the time, I couldn't do that. It was not a tool that was available to me. And I wanted somebody else's voice to do it for me. I could not find it. So I recorded it myself. And that became essentially the first episode ever of Sleep Lists.
I
Yeah.
know I hate listening to my own voice. How did it feel for you to listen to your own voice counting to you?
Well, my sleepless podcast voice is incredibly calming and soothing. So when I speak in my podcasting voice, I don't mind it at all. That's why.
Okay. I see. It's
Eh,
called ASMR, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I don't really try to stimulate that sort of tingly thing in people's brains. I think a lot of sleep podcasts do that. That's not really my intent. My intent is to really help people stop thinking in an alert way and start getting able to go to sleep, like to calm down their thoughts so that they don't have to, they're not focused on the 10,000 things that they need to do in the day or the next day or that they didn't get done or
Yeah.
as I was struggling with depression, all the things that were wrong with me. Like, what a great time to think about those things at like, 10 o'clock at night when I'm trying to go to sleep is just let my depression take over and say everything that I don't want to hear in a day. I mean, that was what was happening to me, and I just needed a calming, loving, soothing voice to say something really boring, but interrupt all the thoughts that I was having in order for me to go to sleep. So I created that podcast for myself. And
Claudia,
there's been
what's
a
the
few other people that like it too.
oh I view okay, I want to ask Claudia some questions because I'm thinking, oh, maybe why is it that our brains start going into this race of thinking and agonizing over and being anxious, and how come this turns on at the worst possible moment? As what's the science behind that, Claudia? Have you had a chance to study that?
Yeah. Well, a lot of the people we work with, either children on the spectrum, people with ADHD, or what you mentioned, chronic depression, this is the time where the brain has nothing else to do. During the day, we see, we listen, we move, and that alone keeps our brain quite busy to keep us alive. But then we lay down, we switch off lights and sound, and here we go. We have all the energy now available. But there is another factor that is crucial in the case of the people who work with, and of course, with you. You mentioned chronic depression. So it tells me your serotonin level was very low.
Yeah.
And what does serotonin do for us? Well, it helps us relax. So obviously, it is also the key for sleep. So chronic depression, zero sleep.
Yep.
So it does many other things, but in your case, you had the worst situation. There is another thing that's very interesting with your podcast and the help you give to people. You describe the voice that you're using.
The
And
voice. Oh no, that was bad.
yeah,
I mean, try
no,
that again.
another one,
That was
please.
scary.
Yeah, no, we want Helen voice. And what research has told us is that they have studied only a mother's voice.
Mm,
But I believe what you describe is soft, gentle, loving. That helps the brain release serotonin. So there is no medication, and you mentioned that as well. You tried a lot of things and it didn't work. There is no medication to improve the release and the function of serotonin. There are medication that sort of mimic and help for 4 hours or 8 hours, and then you sort of pay the bill
yeah.
neurologically. So to have your voice help a person listening have a better release of serotonin, it makes a lot of sense that then that person would be able to relax and fall asleep.
I love that. And I put calming music underneath it too. And I tried, I think that helps as well. It's just very,
Absolutely.
very relaxing. And it's something that I can't, especially when I'm in a state of hyperfixating or ruminating, that I can't do for myself. So this allows me to have a tool that I can turn to, and hopefully, and it helps other people too. So
That's
yeah.
brilliant. And what I love about all what you're saying is that it matches science. It doesn't need to be rooted in science. You are a logical, reasonable person, and you develop something that
Oh yeah.
works just
I
because it
wouldn't go
Yes.
has to
that
work.
far.
Well, I mean, I try to be, but yeah, no, it
Sorry,
was
I'm just teasing you
it.
because we had so much fun when we prepared for this podcast, and I feel like I wanted this episode to be a bit more lighthearted, and so I had a what's the weirdest list you've ever created for your podcast?
I mean, I oftentimes find my lists, so I do sometimes generate them, and I think maybe the strangest one, but actually one of the ones that I enjoyed the most was part of, I believe it was season 2, where I focused on like phrases that kind of have something to do with sleep in the English language and little idioms. And one of those is something being as boring as watching paint dry. This idea that you're just sitting there doing nothing, watching paint dry.
Yeah.
And for making the list, I took it a step further and I thought, well, what if that paint was even a boring color, like beige? And then what if I came up with a list of hundreds of names for the paint color beige? And so that I think is one of my weirder lists where
Yeah.
it's not in any sort of, most of my lists are in a very thoughtful order, so that like if you're the type of person who needs to know what's coming next, like you get a sense of, if it's alphabetical, what's going to happen and what's coming next, or if it's chronological, those kinds of things. But for this one I really randomized it, and I found it was really interesting creating colors for beige. They tended to rely a lot on like dairy products and cheeses and creams and wood, sort of different shades of wood and grass. Sort of all of these like burnt grass is like a beigey color. Yeah, so that was one of my stranger lists, but it was a great one.
I can imagine falling asleep to that.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean, it
Claudia.
should.
Oh, I'm seeing, I'm thinking, what's the word when you associate a sense with another, and when you hear something, you see something.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
skipping my mind as well, but it is even
yeah,
a
what's the word?
condition.
It's not
We may have to look
dysmorphia,
for it
but
later.
it happens with autistic people all the time, where
That's
they're like, I
right.
can smell colors. Yeah, totally.
And that's where I was going with this, and I was wondering if Claudie and you could come up live, if you could come up with the perfect list for people who have those types of sensory.
Aphasians? Is it an aphasion?
No.
Can't remember the
Anyway,
word,
there's
but anyway.
probably tons of people listening to us right now getting really frustrated
I
with
know they're
us
like,
that they know what that
Yeah,
word is and it's screaming at us what that word is.
stick it in the comments.
yeah,
Yes,
exactly. Help
please.
us.
Um, so, and I know I'm going to be super
Would it be
distracted the whole episode.
synesthesia?
Synesthesia.
Yay, we got
Ta-da!
there.
The neuroscientist just came
Ooh.
up with a word.
So, what would be, Claudie, knowing all of our kids and the people we worked with, what would be a fun, not a fun list. I shouldn't say fun list. A good list or a good sequence.
I'm not an expert of lists. You have to ask Helen.
Well,
What?
I was going to say, what I've found is that a lot of people who have said that they deal with autism,
Yeah,
different lists work for them differently. So, for
right.
instance, some of them, if they have a science interest, and they already know like all of the elements of the periodic table, that particular list is very calming to them. Others, who might be more interested in, say, Pokemon, find it really fun and interesting that I have a list of the first original 150 Pokemon in their order of appearance on the show. And then if they're not from America, they might be very interested in how I say those Pokemon names, because it's different than how they say them in South Africa or Australia or England.
Or
So
Japan.
yeah,
Oh,
or well,
France.
and it's not, my pronunciation is nowhere near correct for Japanese. So
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you would say, Claudia, but I think that different people have found different ones work really well for them. Like I have had complaints about my nature-based lists and requests for more nature-based lists. So it really seems to be each person, and that's why I try to keep them very varied. So there's always something that's a little sciency, a little history, a little naturey, a little, you know, creative, versus here's a specific list. So anyway, that has been my finding anecdotally from my audience.
Well, a question.
Yeah.
How long is the list before the person falls asleep? Like how many? You said 150 items of
Mhm.
So if I'm not sleeping yet, do I replay it?
You certainly can. I tend to have a conclusion to every one of my lists. So if you are sadly still awake at the end of the list, you do hear me say, I'm really sorry that you're still awake. It's okay. It happens to the best of us. Continue the list in your mind or replay one of your favorite lists. I kind of give people some ideas of what they can do and how they could do it, um, so that they have an out and don't feel terrible. But some of the lists are about, 15, they're at least 15 minutes long. Most of them are in the 25 to 45-minute range, and some exceed 60 minutes. I know some of
Wow.
them that are longer, I've had people tell me they love it because they just fast forward through the list a little bit and start somewhere new that they didn't
Oh,
hear the night before when they were trying to fall asleep.
nice.
Yeah.
I watch there's a particular TV series. I don't think we have the kind of audience where we have to worry about somebody asking us for rights for mentioning the name, so I'm gonna say it. It's Star Trek Enterprise. I'm on season 3. I've never finished. I don't know what the episodes go through. And I watched that TV show on purpose because it's very soothing. I don't know what it is, but the voices, and even when something bad happens, it's never really loud or scary. It's just very monotone,
Yeah.
and boom, I'm out.
There's a lot of people that love Star Trek that hate that particular iteration of Star Trek because it doesn't have a lot of excitement. It sort of wedges itself between two really well
Yeah.
documented periods in the fictional universe. And so yeah, there's a lot of folks who are not a fan of the show, but maybe it missed its purpose. Maybe its purpose was to help people fall asleep.
Maybe
Mhm.
that's a secret purpose of the producer. Maybe he has sleep issues.
Mm, possible.
So Claudia, can you explain why her lists are working so well? Because it really sounds, Helen, like you're not just, it's not a random list. You're not picking things. There's a thought process, there's a method. I know I've heard people say it has to be interesting enough that your brain is interested in focusing on that, and it helps it forget about this anxiety that's overwhelming it. I don't have sleep problems. Occasionally, I'll wake up in the middle of the night, 3 or 4, and it's like, I can't go back to sleep, and that's when I turn on Netflix and put on a TV show. But some
Mm,
people have got chronic sleep issues, so maybe
yeah.
what? So how do you? So
Well,
Claudia, what is it
it,
about the
it
sequence that
is
needs?
uh, the perfect purpose, I feel, is it is giving control over your thoughts. As you say, it's interesting enough. Like I'm almost fascinated by the concept of so many shades of beige. I think I would want to know all of them. And while I'm thinking of them, I see beige. I can't help it. So I'm not seeing anything else. And all the intrusive thoughts are kept at bay. And as you're reading with this very soothing voice, my serotonin is being released. So I am more and more relaxed and still listening until basically there is a connection of every of the good stuff, enough serotonin to be relaxed and falling asleep, and no more cortisol issues that keep my thoughts racing. So it makes so much sense. And yes, I really want to listen to the
I
beige
I know I
list.
know the beige one is also interesting, and it made me think, is it important, Claudia, that there's a sensory component to the list? Like, do you need to be, does it help if you can see the color beige, or if you can smell the grass, or if you can taste all the different types of
Well,
pie? That's a good
I
list. I would
would
like that
ask
list.
Helen. She's the expert when you are yourself listening to the beige, because I have the feeling that if I was listening to that list, you also mentioned grass and trees. I cannot imagine listening and not seeing them. So
So yeah, my question is,
Yeah.
is it
yeah.
valuable, or should Helen focus on lists that do not have an easily other sensory component that you can associate
Mm.
with it?
Well, she got something that works. So I'm not going to introduce anything. I like the idea of having another sense that is imagined, right? It's a mental image of it. So it's a mental image of memories that you have that you try to attach to those words. So it continues to keep your brain activity focused on something very soothing. So, but do you see the
Mm,
beige, Helen?
I sometimes I imagine them. I mean, it's funny because there's 1,000 different words for sand that basically made their way into the beige list, essentially. Words for sands and dairy products and everything like that. And so, but I do have another list that's all different types of grasses, like different species of grasses that are found. I've one for sheep, all the different, not all the different species of sheep, 500 of the 700 plus species of sheep that I could verify on several sites. I do try to do a little bit of research. I try to make them valid because I'm the type of person who, unless it is totally made up, like the idea of shades of beige, right? Like I'm not, I mean, the colors, the names of colors of paint are very much a creative endeavor.
Yeah.
It's a marketing ploy, right? So those are completely made up. But when I did the presidents and the vice presidents, I was very careful to go, chronologically and list each of the vice presidents and when there were vacancies in the vice presidency, which in the United States, I had no idea happened as often as it did historically. So that was fun to research and figure out. I kind of follow where I think that there's something a little bit interesting, but that isn't important. So for me, it
Mm,
tends to be about like, this is trivia stuff. This is not life-changing stuff. This is not the top 10 things that you need to do today to make your life better. This is the 100 different types of cheeses produced in France, right? Like I don't actually have that list. I've thought about it, but I try not to do food because people get hungry and hunger is the enemy
uh-huh.
of sleep. So,
See, you're
yeah.
so how did you like, is it instinctive? Or did you what kind of how do you
I
know?
mean, I
Because
have a list on my phone of like ideas and then I talk to people and they're like, "Oh, you should do this." And I put it down there and then I, decide yes or no and if it's interesting, if there's an authority on it or not, because sometimes that's important. Um I recently recorded that hasn't been released, but it's episode about prize winning roses. And so that was a really interesting episode because for the first time I had a list where in the United States the Rose Growers Association has divided the country into like 7 different regions, and as a result, there are some roses that do well and have done well prize-wise in multiple regions. And so I was able to do the list by region and then repeat some things throughout because they were peppered throughout. So I'm interested to see once I release that fully if that list with a little bit of periodic repetition is interesting to folks and they listen to it again, or if it's not, and if it's not a very popular episode. So we'll see. I try different things. It's like I said, it's trivial but interesting. So interesting but not important things that I think are something that I find like I'd like to research that. I'd like to figure that out. Um, the internet is amazing because I grew up at a time when if I wanted to know the definition of a word or get the answer to a question, I had a little book, a notebook that I wrote down my questions in and my words that I wanted to define in. And then when I went to the library, like once a week, these are the things I would look up and try to find books and try to find it in the dictionary
Uh-huh.
to like learn what it is. And now you can ask a question and have an answer in 10 seconds and it's authoritative in some respects. So using that tool of the internet, I have a lot of fun satisfying my own little curiosities, and sometimes that becomes a list later. Anyway,
I was going
Well,
to ask you what you found to be the most rewarding with creating sleep lists. I did not expect that on that list of reasons it's a rewarding process that you actually are it feels like learning something new is interesting for you. Like it's like kind of a driver.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the most important thing is that it helps people. So like it absolutely, the reason why I do it is that people keep on saying that they're benefiting from it. It helps them. And, when you get reviews that say things like, I've had sleep issues ever since I experienced, time as a soldier on the war front and in combat. And I had a good night's sleep last night. Like it was easy for me to fall asleep and it felt like it was the first time in a long time, thanks to your list. Like that's a lot of motivation to be like, okay,
Wow.
I'll try some more. I'll do it again. I'll make another
Yeah.
one.
What
So
is
Yeah.
that's,
fascinating?
yeah.
It's fascinating for me. That's so wonderful what you're saying. You are doing that to help. And that's so different from a lot of people that we meet here and there that are doing it for the glory, for basically you are creating a podcast so that people stop listening
Yes.
because they
Yeah.
fall asleep.
Yeah, my
Oh, yes.
college alma mater did a really cute back page about my podcast, and they literally said the most boring podcast in the world. And it's like it's supposed to be. So I
Yeah.
took that as an
Yeah.
honor.
Hmm.
Have
And
you received any requests? I'm sure you have. You said you did receive requests, but what's the weirdest or the most unusual or memorable request you've received?
So part of my one side of my family is Lebanese, and a portion of them speak Arabic and as a second language, not as a first language, but one of my cousins asked me to do a list of um classic Lebanese dishes. And all I could think of is, oh my God, that's going to make tons of people hungry. I'm going to be told 1,000 times over how poorly I pronounce every Arabic word that I try to speak. And I'm going to have to go and make all that food because I'm going to want it because it's like
yeah.
memories from my childhood.
Hmm.
So I don't know if that was the weirdest request, but that was the one that I was most like, yeah, no, not gonna do it.
Oh,
So there isn't a podcast episode on Lebanese dishes?
There's not. Again, hunger is kind of the enemy of sleep. And so I don't like to create lists that make people hungry. In fact, I did a list on edible flowers, and that one it's gotten some good play, but I think it wasn't a good direction to take the show in.
Um, if you could collaborate with anyone, living or dead, to create a sleep list, who would it be and what
Mm.
kind of list would you create together?
Well, I would love to work with any kind of sponsor that was interested in doing like a product list. Like that would be really fun for me, like to do an inventory product list. I think that would be neat. So if there's anyone out there who has inventory and wants to collaborate with helping people sleep, I would be all for it. Um Historical figures though.
What about Matthew McConaughey? You don't want to have his voice on your podcast? Or is sexiness the opposite of sleep too?
Well, I mean, I don't know. One can lead to the other, I guess. But I think that yeah, I don't know that if I could collaborate with anyone, the collaboration would probably be their ideas and my voice on the list. And so there's lots of people. I mean, I think it'd be really fun to collaborate with kids in particular, especially if they're having trouble sleeping. I would love to know what they're interested in and what they think might make a good list. Like types of dinosaurs, would that be awesome? Or would they be like, no? Or would it be like,
oh.
trucks, that kind of thing? So, um, different types of trains. Gosh, there's so many different things you could do. But yeah, I would love to get like a good focus group of kids. So I don't think it'd be any one person, but it would be a bunch of kids that are alive, elementary school age kids telling me that do have trouble sleeping, saying, "Oh, I'd like to hear this from your podcast."
It gives me an idea. What if we reached out to all our special ed directors and asked them to, they're always looking for projects and ideas and stuff, right? What if we said, we need a list of 400 of the something that goes with that something,
That'd be
and
fun.
yeah, and then maybe have a prize for the best and funnest list, and you'd be featured on this podcast, and you'd be
I mean,
promoted, and
I was gonna say the
I don't know,
prize is that your list
right?
gets made, right? Like,
Yeah.
your list becomes a sleep list.
Mhm.
You talked about voice being important, and
Yeah.
Claudia talked about, the mother's voice. And then you said, when I asked you if you would want to collaborate with anyone, you didn't mention speaking with them on a podcast. You seem to feel, do you have a sense of why it's important that it is your voice?
Yeah, I mean, some of that is ownership and my own like controlling nature of things when it comes to having my own podcast, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
I get to control it. It's mine. Um, but I do think that there's a consistency. So when I'm recording, I do voiceover work as well, and so I record lots of different voices. But when I'm recording my podcast voice, it is very much a I'm your friend, I'm here to help. I'm sincerely coming to this, like, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, like, I'm just offering you this tool that's worked for me, that I hope works for you, and I have a pace and a tenor in my voice that I think is very authentic, and as a result, it doesn't bother too many people. I did have a former colleague of mine who I was their boss, tell me that my list sounded like a bunch of like directions, like it was like all she could do is hear my voice telling her what to do, like in terms of like work that she had to do. And I was like, I'm so sorry, this isn't going to work for you, is it? She's like, no, it's not. So it's not for everyone, and it's not for every night either. Like, it doesn't have to be for every night. It's one tool that can help, and it's meant to be a tool that is designed with a lot of some of the top tips in mind, in terms of like, you don't want to turn on a screen, so it's audio only. You don't want to necessarily have loud sounds, like it allows, so and the soothing music, and it's not super stimulating. So anyway, all these things that try to play into this idea of helping folks fall asleep, and not giving them another bad habit or a another crutch for disordered sleep, but rather a stepping stone towards healthy, restorative sleep.
Again,
Yeah.
everything you say makes so much sense. And Claudia was talking about the mother's voice, and the way you're describing the intention behind your voice, then
Yeah,
it's there you go. This is we're tapping into a, that's why it's working so well. So
I think so.
kudos.
I
Thank you
hope
so
so.
much. I'm so glad we found you, and
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be, I feel excited to, I want to share this.
Yay.
And I have one, I want to end on a funny question.
Okay.
You must have, because you talk about sleep. You're a sleep evangelist, so you do sleep, you do stuff around sleep. So, what's the funniest or strangest question around sleep that someone has asked you about sleep?
Mm. Well, I think I think the funniest thing that happens over and over again to me is the number of people who think that their sleep is okay, but then say something to me that makes it very clear that they're working on sleep deprivation already. So they tend to be a person who's like, I don't have any problems with sleep. I'm fine with sleep, but
Uh-oh, I
I
said
get
that earlier.
I get 5 hours of sleep a night. That's all my body needs. It is so unlikely that you're the 0.2% marginalized, like, part of the standard deviation curve that is the people that actually have enough sleep happening at 5 hours, when almost all of us need more than 7 hours of sleep. So you're subtracting 2 from what we need, and anything less than 7 is generally considered sleep deprivation. So I hear a lot of people telling me that I don't have problems with sleep. I get 5 hours of sleep a night. I'm perfectly fine. I can totally function. Um, and then they ask me like, "But, what should other people do to get good sleep?" And I'm like, "Have you tried XYZ? Like, are you sure you're good? Like,
Uh-huh.
are you short-tempered? Do you wanna take naps all the time? Like, where do you get those other 2 hours from?" So,
Yeah.
those are the kinds of questions where I feel like we are living in a culture where people don't value sleep and don't understand what they need, and fortunately, we're at a time in medical and scientific research where we're starting to emphasize more how important sleep is, so that I hope today's medical students, or at least the next decade's worth of medical students, will stop talking to their patients just about diet and exercise and start really focusing on sleep as a main component of our health triad, because in theory it should be a third or more of our lives spent sleeping.
When you put
I
it that
agree.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen to that. I feel a bunch of our listeners are parents who want the 7 hours and who are being deprived of that
Oh, yeah.
in their life because their children are awake and not getting the 7 hours either.
Mhm. Well,
Fortunately, a lot of those people work with us and we can help them and it resolves. But I have a feeling that there's a lot of frustrated parents out there like, I'm not one of them. I want 7 hours. So the first thing we're going to tell them is, hey, try the Sleep Lists podcast.
yes. Also, I would
And
say naps count. Like, it's okay if you're not getting 7 hours all at once, like, naps count, and
yeah,
we do the best that we can with the tools that we've got and the situations that we're in, right? So,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not their fault, but they can work to getting the next best improvement. So,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, it
yeah.
was so nice to meet you, Helen. I'm so glad we did this podcast together. And
Likewise, me
I
too.
hope that we can, get this more and more people listen to your very, very practical tool.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and, if folks have ideas for the next sleep list, send them my way.
We
There
will.
you go. Have a nice week, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.